Welcome to Starborn Saga. Get ready to witness humanity's greatest secrets unfold. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments, and keep up with our latest stories.
Jake Martinez was standing before the enormous metal doors. He had solid hands, but his heart was pounding rapidly. Around him, faint humming sounds came from the alien space station. Hundreds of distinct extraterrestrial beings had arrived. To observe their thoughts would be his demise. The 20-foot-tall doors were coated in odd symbols that, in the faint light, flashed crimson. The galaxy's most fearsome combatants were waiting behind those doors. No one had ever entered the room by themselves and survived, as everyone knew. Jake was an earthly human commander. He had participated in numerous space conflicts. However, this was not like the others. This had nothing to do with technology, ships, or weaponry. This was about a person using just his bare hands to fight 3 alien killers. The animals seeing him originated from the worlds are numerous. Some were armless, while others possessed 4 arms. A few were scale-covered, while some possessed metal-like skin. However, they all shared a common trait. All of them thought Jake's death was imminent. Jake was standing next to Lisa Harper. She had been his friend for a long time and was also a human captain. Years in the battle against the robot armies. They had fought together. They possessed more times than they could count. They saved each other's lives. The words, "You don't have to do this," murmured Lisa softly. "We already demonstrated that people could fight. We had already earned our spot among the stars." Jake grinned as he glanced at her. "They don't yet comprehend us, Lisa, so this isn't about proving anything. It's about showing them something." The most feared race, the Cathara, an alien entity in charge of the battle, approached them. This one stood 9 feet tall and had 4 limbs that culminated in vicious claws. Vextal, the chief of all the Cathara warriors, was strong enough to sever steel. Human Martinez. In the language shared by all space travelers, Vextal stated, "Your people we were astonished by your ships and machines. But natural murderers still do the real fighting. You will have to," the alien gestured toward the doors, with one of its clawed hands pointing to 3 of our finest fighters. Zark, the Bone Crusher, has the Shadow Sword, can move quicker than your eyes can follow. And you have murdered more foes than you have years in your life. Scifvar, the Minder, has the ability to assault your mind and make you go crazy with terror. Jake nodded, having read the paperwork on these 3 murderers, who had all won. Each one was constructed to withstand hundreds of battles and had never lost a single one. By nature to be an ideal murderous machine. "I get it," Jake replied. "Weapons, no assistance, only me against them." The alien throng moved nearer to the viewing windows. Some of them had placed bets, and they wanted to witness the human death. The majority of bets were for less than a minute, and the little alien that resembled a walking the spider's mandibles snapped together. "The human is bold, but foolish, are feeble. They lack armor, claws, and other abilities. They are simply soft. Meet," a big 6-eyed alien chuckled. "I've witnessed human combat before. They're resourceful, and they're vessels, but they are nothing without those. This one will perish fast." But some aliens weren't so certain. An elderly gray-skinned monster, its tentacles in place of arms, kept a close eye on Jake. It had lived for 300 years and had witnessed a wide variety of races. Battle, the human's serene countenance, for some reason, made it ponder. The doors opened with a thunderclap. Beyond, light streamed from the combat arena. It was the color of blood, and Jake knew that this was no coincidence. Jake could see that the aliens who constructed this location intended for fighters to consider death before they even started. Now enter the chamber, a vast circular space with movable, shape-changing walls and a covered floor. In sand, darkened by the blood of hundreds of warriors who had died, in the middle of the space, 3 enormous shapes awaited him. Jake could see the size and threat of his adversaries, even from this distance. Zark stood, appeared to bend in the center, his arms as thick as tree trunks, with bone spikes protruding from his knuckles and elbows, and change in the crimson light as though he were composed of shadow rather than actual material. Skull was twice as large as strange lights pulsed beneath his skin, and his skull was normal. "Last chance to escape away." "Human," Vex still murmured. no one will consider you less. Already, your species has exceeded everyone's expectations." Lisa took Jake's arm as he moved toward the doors and said, "Thanks, but I didn't come this far." To turn back now, Jake smiled at her and said, "I will remember what makes us human. Remember what makes us different. Just what I'm hoping for." He entered the room, and with a loud boom, the doors shut behind him. The final sound, like to the closing of a coffin lid, reverberated throughout the station. He was surrounded by 3 Cathar soldiers who moved with the assurance of animals who had never experienced defeat. In contrast to his adversaries, Jake Martinez appeared small and feeble as he stood in the middle of the arena, but he was not fearful. Anxious, yes, his mouth felt dry, his heart pounding rapidly. However, he possessed something that these flawless killers lacked. Thus, he was not scared. He possessed the one thing that had allowed people to survive for millions of years on a perilous planet. The battle was about to start, and the fighting chamber was ready to withstand any challenges. Larger than Jake anticipated, with walls that wrapped around him like the interior of a gigantic globe and red lights emanating from all at once, giving the impression that everything was coated in blood and the floor was made of loose sand that shifted beneath his foot with every stride. Jake turned to see that the walls were more than simply walls. They contained machines. He could see areas where the floor would abruptly rise or fall, and that could cause the walls to move and change shape. Down this was a death trap, not only a space for combat, to murder in a variety of ways, his 3 adversaries observed him from opposite corners of the room. Moving slowly in, Jake could see that they had done this numerous times before, and they circled around him like ravenous wolves around a campfire. Zareth was the largest of the 3, at nearly 10 feet tall, and they understood just how to cooperate to kill their victim. Feet tall, with arms so thick that Jake could not have wrapped his own around them, and a body like a mountain of muscle and bone. Arms around them, and sharp spikes of bone protruded from his knuckles, shoulders, and elbows, which moved when he did. Thale was more difficult to see, and they scraped against one another, making a noise akin to sharpening blades. Appeared to be composed of smoke and shadow, and the crimson light curved about him in odd ways, making it difficult to determine his precise location or movement. Jake had read that them could move quicker than most, and his eyes shone in the blackness of his face like yellow stars. Of the 3, Sexvar was the most terrifying because of his body. Was typical in size for a Catharo, but he had a large, balloon-shaped head. Jake felt something pressing against his thoughts as strange lights pulsed beneath his skin. The alien was attempting to enter his thoughts. "You smell like fear," Humanzarka remarked. "Your heart is beating fast, like a scared rabbit," Jake said in a low, gritty voice that sounded like stones grinding against one another. Gave a nod. "You're correct, I'm afraid. But what do you know? This is going to become more fascinating." The 3 extraterrestrials exchanged bewildered glances, as in their culture. Being afraid indicated you were Sexvar sent a shock of fear into Jake's mind. They had never encountered a species who used fear as a weapon. Thoughts. It was similar to being struck by a truck driven by sheer terror. Most animals would. The alien had never touched human brains, but Jake's thinking was different. They had collapsed to the ground, screaming, were disorganized, thinking about a lot of things at once, and worrying about both the past and the future. They might be calm, angry, brave, and afraid all at once. Sexvar. Sexvar questioned, "What's wrong with your mind?" Jake's attack was lost in the jumble of his thoughts. Like a storm. Jake grinned. "Practice lots. How do you think with so much noise?" After much practice, he did something that took everyone by surprise. Rather than attempting to battle all, instead of running straight at Sexvar, Jake ran straight at 3 aliens at once. He simply rushed as fast as he could, right at the mind reader, without trying to be clever or lying. Sexvar attempted to read Jake's ideas, to see what he had planned, but Jake was just running and allowing his body to do the work. When he arrived, he made a decision that no other creature had ever done before. Jake arrived. Kexvar, and threw his hand as forcefully as he could, striking the alien square, in the more shocked than harmed. Sexvar staggered backwards, his large swelling head. "Impossible," he murmured. "I cannot see," Jake smiled and said, "Welcome to being human." What will you do next, because you do not know what will happen next? With his bone spikes pointing forward, Zarketh growled and charged at Jake, who could see the strike coming, but did, instead of attempting to avoid or block, he picked up a handful of sand from the ground and hurled it directly into Zareth's eyes. The room trembled as the large alien struck the wall behind where Jake had been standing only a moment earlier. Zareth yelled again after the blow, but this time he was blind and furious. They attempted to attack Jake from behind him as he observed Zareth. The shadow alien was nearly invisible due to his rapid movements, but Jake was not. He never stayed stationary. He was constantly on the go, constantly shifting course. Thiel's claws sliced through the air where Jake had been for over a second, but Jake was all ready. He was like water flowing past boulders, always finding a way to get where he was going, moving without any strategy or pattern. Thurl yelled, "Stand still and fight like a warrior," and stopped running. Jake chuckled and said, "I'm not running around like a coward. I'm moving to the music." The floor beneath Jake's feet started to rise, and a stone pillar was growing out. Of the wall, thanks to the machinery in the walls, most warriors would have attempted to shatter the pillar or jumped off, but Jake rode it up like he was on an elevator. Jake was 15 feet above the arena when the pillar stopped growing. Floor. All three of his adversaries were below him, staring up at him with wrath and bewilderment. The aliens who were watching gasped when Jake sprang from the pillar and landed on Sexfar's back. The alien gathering was quiet now, and Jake slid away before the other two could grab him after the mind regator went down hard. The human wasn't following, and this wasn't how battles were meant to proceed. Rules they comprehended. He wasn't attempting to be shrewd, tough, or quick, simply being erratic. While Jake was only beginning the battle, which had been going on for 10 minutes, despite being soaked in perspiration and having 3 tears in his shirt, he continued to move, battle, and live. Frustrated, the 3 warriors had anticipated the human Zark, wiped the sand from his eyes, and charged once more, expecting to be dead by now. His bone spikes were pointed directly at Jake's chest, and he advanced more slowly, keeping his eyes open. The blow would have killed any regular animal, but Jake was human, not a normal one, and instead of swerving left or right like any intelligent Jake, fell to his knees and slid beneath Zareth's legs as a fighter would. The large alien was unable to stop his charge quickly enough and crashed into the arena wall once more. Stone fragments dropped to the ground, and Zareth shook his head before turning around. His eyes were filled with anger, and blue blood was streaming down his brow. "Stop moving like a worm," Zareth shouted. Jake scooped up one of the fallen stones and hurled it toward Zareth's face, although it wasn't a difficult throw. "Fight me like a warrior." However, it caused the alien to duck, and Jake sprinted to the opposite side of the arena as Zareth did so. "I'm fighting like a warrior," Jake yelled back. "I'm battling like a human warrior." Famel had decided to try a different strategy after seeing this, and he started to travel across the arena so quickly that Jake was unable to distinguish between 3 or 4 shadow representations of him at once, and the shadow alien attacked from all sides. His claws struck Jake from the left, right, and above all, at once. Instead of attempting to avoid the 3 attacks, which should have been impossible to avoid, Jake threw himself down on the ground and rolled, hitting empty air above him with each of the 3 shadow blows. He emerged from his roll behind the Jake, took the shadow alien by the waist, and raised him up, saying, "Reel thy single quotes, mole." Falel was taken aback, because he thought the human would be much weaker. But Jake had been working hard and lifting huge objects his entire life. Jake tossed them across the field. His muscles were powerful, but not as large as those of the alien's arena. The shadow alien slid to the ground after colliding with the wall. He stood up, swiftly, but Jake could tell he was injured, and one arm was hanging at an odd angle. "How did you know which is which?" Jake grinned. "Easy." "One was real?" Fimo inquired. "The real one cast a shadow. The false ones didn't, but on the ground." As Jake spoke to them, Kexfar attempted another mental assault, this time attempting to confuse Jake rather than frighten him. Jake staggered and nearly fell as he transmitted thoughts of nausea and lightheadedness into the human's mind. His attack was effective. He could feel his equilibrium slipping away, and everything began to swirl around him. But then Sexfar had never witnessed anything like what Jake accomplished, and instead of resisting the disorientation, he appeared to be dancing to music that only he could hear, moving in circles and curves while allowing the dizziness to direct his movements. He could hear Dot. His foes found it more difficult to predict his next move because of the spinning and weaving. Next, Jake was using the alien's abilities to turn his weakness into a strength. Assault on him. As Jake spun, Zareth attempted to seize him, but the human slipped between his fingers like water. Jake was already elsewhere when Thymol attempted to strike him with his good arm. Kexfar attempted to make the mental strike more forcefully, but it simply caused Jake to maneuver in more perplexing ways, begun to shift around them with new barriers and shifting walls. Emerged, deep holes appeared, and in some spots, sharp spikes rose from the floor. The majority of creatures would have been terrified of the shifting arena, which was attempting to murder all 4 warriors in others. However, Jake sensed an opportunity and started taking advantage of the rising floors and changing walls. A wall moved, he shoved it away from him to change course, and he jumped higher when spikes sprung from the ground. The arena was changing, and 3 Cathara warriors were struggling with it. Were large and powerful, but their lack of agility caused them to repeatedly collide with walls that had not been there a moment before. Jake was unique. He had been raised in a world that was constantly changing. The ability of humans to quickly adjust to changing circumstances was what kept when they became larger. Stronger animals desired to consume them, and a new pillar emerged. Off the floor directly beside Jake, rather than stepping away, he seized it and swung around it like a pole. He was able to kick Theo in the chest with enough speed from the swing. Your single quotations mole did not get up this time. It flew backward and struck another pillar that was rising from the floor. He was not moving, but he was still breathing. One of the 3 murderers was Sexvar, felt frantic after witnessing his partner's fall and threw all of his mental strength at Jake at once. Jake's vision turned white and he collapsed to his knees as if struck by a bolt of pure thinking. However, even Jake's human brain was processing the pain and thoughts as he fell. Uncertainty, he recalled a long-ago lesson from his former teacher. When you can't see your enemy, listen. For Jake closed his eyes and listened to them, hearing the labored breathing of Sexvar. He could hear the sound of the alien's feet stepping on the sand, claws scuffing the stone. And Jake opened his eyes and sent a forceful upward punch as close as he could to Sexvar. Sexvar made a gasping noise as his fist struck the alien squarely in the throat and fell backward. Jake was already on when the mind redater attempted to get up. Top of him, Jake struck him once more, this time in the temple, causing Sexvar to stop moving and roll his eyes back to down. Jake got up and turned to face Zareth. The large extraterrestrial was the only Jake was growing weary, and the only one remaining was the strongest and most dangerous. Jake and Zareth faced the large extraterrestrial, glanced at his 2 fallen comrades before turning back to face the human. There was something new in his eyes for the first time since the fight started. It wasn't precisely fear, but it was near. "You weren't what we anticipated," Zareth remarked. His tone had changed to one of caution and hush. "We spent months researching your species. Videos of people fighting were shown to us. We believed we were aware of your abilities." Jake used the back of his hand to wipe perspiration from his face. He was having trouble breathing, although steady. "Humans are difficult to examine since our fighting styles differ, twice. As we move along, we make it up." Zareth surveyed the arena. For the time being, the walls had ceased to move, but impediments still blanketed the floor. Sharp protuberances protruded from some locations, deep holes appeared. On others, alien blood was black on the sand. Zareth remarked, "Brothers are not dead. However, they are done. You have accomplished an unprecedented feat. Previously, in a single battle, you have vanquished Cathara warriors." Jake gave a nod. "One more to go, to down." Zareth said, "Yes. I'm not like my brothers, though. I avoid using shadow games or mental tricks. I am speed and strength. The bones of champions from 50 different worlds have been crushed." The large alien started to slowly go around Jake. His spikes of bones scraped against one another with every step, like fingernails on a blackboard. The sound was intended to frighten adversaries. Jake, however, was not anxious. He was worn Out his lungs were burning, and his muscles were hurting, yet he was not anxious. There had been worse times for him, as you are aware. Funny, Jake asked, shifting Zareth out of his way. Everyone always discusses the weakness of humans, pointing out that they lack armor, claws, and special abilities. One thing they forget. What is that? Zareth inquired. We never give up. You can harm us, you can beat us down, you can cause us to bleed, but we always get back up, Zareth charged. Suddenly, his bone spikes were pointed toward Jake's heart, and the attack was quicker than he had ever used. With hardly any time to move, Jake rolled sideways and felt the spikes pierce the air where his chest had been. The large alien was quicker than Jake had anticipated, but Zareth was already turning to strike again as he came up racing. It was a lethal game of cat and mouse for the next 5 minutes, with Jake dodging and Zareth charging as the aliens attacked. Jake's shirt had a dozen cuts, and they were growing closer every time. Were faint smudges of blood on his chest and arms, but Jake was not slowing down. Something odd was going on. He was moving more fluidly, and if anything, he was growing faster. His breathing was becoming more steady, and he was moving into what others referred to as the zona state, in which people could time, seemed to slow down at periods of extreme stress, and everything became evident and straightforward. Fear vanished, pain faded, and the body found power didn't realize it had. Zareth started to observe the shift. The person wasn't. His eyes were sharp and focused, his movements fluid, and he was no longer behaving like prey, but rather like a predator. And self-assured. What's going on with you? Zareth inquired, after a brief break in combat. You ought to be. You should calm down. You're tired by now. Jake grinned. The smile wasn't pleasant. It was a creature smile that had discovered its prey. This is the result of running 20 meters every day for 10 years. This is what growing up is all about. This is what being human gets you in a world where everything wants to devour you. Zareth charged once more, but Jake didn't evade this time. He charged at the extraterrestrial. He slipped and fell at the last second between legs of Zareth. He punched up as hard as he could as he slid. His first blow, Zareth, was in a sensitive, soft place. The large extraterrestrial sounded like a shattered steam pipe and staggered ahead. Jake was already getting back up and sliding away. It's impossible, Zareth exclaimed. It should be impossible for you to move that way. It shouldn't be possible for you to hit so hard. Jake's knuckles cracked. I've only just begun. The extraterrestrial throng, observing via the observation windows, was very quiet. This was unlike anything they had ever seen. The person was not only getting by, he was winning, and he was doing it without any special abilities, armor, or claws. He was using nothing but tenacity and the will to persevere. Lisa Harper pressed the viewing window to her face. She could see how Jake has changed. She had previously witnessed it in the most intense robot war conflicts. Jake had disappeared, merely battling for their lives. He was fighting for victory. Whispering, "Come on, Jake," she said. "Prove to them our abilities. Off." Jake started doing something in the arena that caused the aliens who were watching to gasp. He began to pursue Zareth. The humans were no longer attempting to flee or sidestep the conflict. He was vigorously going after the extraterrestrial combatant. Zark felt himself pulled backward. The person was coming at them from every angle, taking advantage of the barriers in the arena. Whenever Zark attempted a strong attack, Jake was somewhere else, striking him from the side or behind. The large extraterrestrial was breathing heavily right now. His strikes were getting less precise and slower. The bone spikes that appeared to be so harmful were now merely added weight that made him move more slowly. "You cannot win," declared Zaruz. However, he sounded less assured than previously. "I am more powerful than you, larger than you. I'm made to kill." For the first time in 20 minutes, Jake froze and remained still. His eyes were steady and peaceful as he gazed at Zareth. "You're right," Jake informed him. "You are bigger and stronger. However, you proved one error." "What went wrong?" Zark phoned and inquired. "You thought that would be sufficient." For a while, Zareth gazed at Jake. The chest of the large alien started rising and plummeting. Quickly, his face and limbs were slashed, and blue blood oozed. His bone, after repeatedly striking the arena walls. The spikes had become dulled and shattered. A dot, Jake remained still in the middle of the arena. His eyes were bright and clear, but his garments were bloody and ripped. He appeared capable of, if he had to, he could battle for another hour. Zareth stated that this was not feasible. "You are only one tiny person. I am a warrior from Cathara. I am the highest predator in the galaxy." Jake's head cocked to one side. "Do you know what's wrong with you? You believe that being the biggest and strongest makes you the best, but in my culture, that isn't the case." "Then, how is it effective?" Zareth inquired. "Simple," agreed Jake. "Whoever declines is the best. Should remain on the ground." Zareth roared, causing the arena to tremble. He rushed, he threw everything he had at Jake. The spikes on his bones were pointing forward like spears. In case the spikes missed, he had his forearms outstretched to seize the human. This was his last assault, and he was giving it everything he had left. Jake held off until Zareth was nearly above him. Then, at the last second, he shifted to the side. But instead, Jake took hold of one of Zareth's arms. Instead of avoiding him entirely, the extraterrestrial hurried. Jake used Zareth's own weight and speed against him in the past. He had made a move, learned in a martial arts class back on Earth as a child, not during military training. Jake put his feet down. He threw the enormous alien over his shoulder. After turning his hips, Zareth's tumble into the arena floor might have been reverberated over the space station. The stone beneath him broke from the force of the crash. For a while, the large, astonished, the alien simply laid there a dot. Jake was standing over him, still upright, but breathing heavily. "Stay down," he instructed silently. Attempted to stand up, saying, "You fought well. There's no shame in losing to someone who won't quit." His arms, the effort, made him tremble, but he was able to push himself to his knees. Jake could sense the alien's resolve in his eyes. Zareth was tired and bruised, but he was still fighting. "I am unable to remain down," Zareth commanded. "We do not surrender. I am Cathara." Jake nodded with courtesy. "I get it, but sometimes knowing is the bravest thing you can do." Zareth tried to stand one last time before the fight ended. He reached halfway before he fell back to the arena floor as his legs failed him. He made no attempt to get back up this time. The body had finally had enough. A dot. Jake gazed down at the warrior who had fallen. "Zareth, you fought honorably. Your people ought to be pleased with you." There was no sound at all in the arena. Jake was by alone in the middle of the room, surrounded by 3 Cathara warriors who were vanquished. They were all alive, but none of them were completed. The unthinkable had occurred. A human had prevailed. The arena's entrance with a loud grinding noise, it opened. Jake approached them cautiously, his legs trembling from fatigue. Every action was an attempt, but he continued on. He had vowed to himself that he would survive this encounter. Additionally, he was honoring that commitment. There was silence. Among the aliens observing from the observation decks, they had anticipated witnessed the cruelest imaginable manner for a human to perish. Rather, they had observed something that would permanently alter their perception of people. The leader of Cathara, Vextal, was the first to talk. His voice echoed across the communication system throughout the arena. "The human has prevailed. Jake Martinez has overcome 3 of our best fighters in one battle. This has never occurred in the combat's history." Room. Jake arrived at the entrance to the arena and entered. Lisa Harper had tears in her eyes. As she waited for him, she put her arms around him and embraced him. "You did it," she muttered. With a weary smile, Jake said, "You actually did it." I promised to walk out by themselves. The extraterrestrial throng started conversing in hundreds of several languages. While some sounded shocked, some irate, but everyone sounded different from what they had before the altercation started. The tiny, spider-like extraterrestrial who had wagered against Jake clicked its teeth anxiously. What did he do? He has no unique abilities. He's not even quite large for a person. Slowly, an ancient gray alien with limbs made of tentacles responded, "He prevailed due to his humanity. They are not the strongest, fastest, or largest. They are the most obstinate, though they just won't accept defeat." The human scientist who had arrived to investigate alien life, Dr. Alan Foster Biology, forced his way through the throng to Jake. "That was amazing. You simply demonstrated something that we've spent years attempting to explain why humans don't prevail. because we're inherently superior. We prevail because we adjust and persevere. News of Jake's triumph circulated across the space station. Minutes news of the battle had spread throughout the galaxy by the end of the day. The narrative was consistently the same. There had been a human who had entered the Cathara fighting chamber and survived. 3 months later, Jake was in front of the delegates of the Galactic Council. From the enormous room was filled with hundreds of worlds. At the speaker's stage stood Vexthal, the leader of Cathara. The Cathara has gained crucial knowledge, Vexthal declared. Strength can take many different forms. People don't have our stature, our armor, or our claws. However, they possess an additional item. They possess the capacity to adjust to any circumstance. They are determined to continue fighting when others would give up. They have demonstrated to us that the adversary who is unwilling to acknowledge that they have been defeated, the leader of the Cathara stopped and turned to face Jake. The Cathara formally asks the Galactic Defense Alliance to grant mankind full membership today, not as junior partners on an equal footing. We already know that in a cosmos filled of specialists, the most useful ally of all might be the species that doesn't specialize. There was a unanimous vote. Jake Martinez had entered that arena as a mere mortal attempting to establish himself. He left as the symbolizing a species that had merited its position among the stars, not with better technology or overwhelming power, but by the mere human will to persevere. Jake later that evening sat in a peaceful The Diplomatic Station's bar. Grinning, he held up a glass of Earth whiskey. Sometimes being human was the greatest way to succeed.